Gambia's president addressed the nation after pressure from citizens. Nigeria loses more than $20 billion annually due to inadequate power supply. And oil pollution threatens residents' health in South Sudan's oil-producing regions. Well, this and more coming on The World Today. Well, this is Africa TV and you are watching the World Today News Bulletin. I am Amadou Kante. Many thanks for joining us, and now the news in detail. Now, the Gambian President Adama Barrow will address the nation tonight at 8 p.m. This will be the only sixth time for the President to speak to the Gambians on the country's COVID-19 situation since the first case of the virus was recorded in the country in March. Barrow's noticeable absence and silence as the virus ravages the country led to a public outcry, with civil society groups demanding he must speak to the nation. The coronavirus outbreak is crippling the country's health and economic sectors, as several caregivers either contracted the virus or are forced to self-isolate. Economic activities have also been brought to a near halt as confirmed cases rise to more than 1,600 with 50 deaths. As cases rose last week, 8 civil society groups threatened to take illegal action should the government fail to meet a 10-point demand, which included providing full medical packages to frontline line workers. Now, joining me on the line to discuss this latest development is Mfamara Jaune, Executive Director of Mbe Kanya. Mr. Jaune, thank you very much for joining us this time. And the President is, of course, expected to speak to the nation for the first time in 2 months and after pressure from CSOs. Now, why is this address important?
Thank you very much for having me, and good evening to the viewers. I think it's very, very important for the President to address the nation at this moment. This is what we've been calling for during the past couple of weeks. For the fact that the President, being the Commander-in-Chief and head of the nation, it is very, very important for him not only to come out and address the citizens, but to engage more with the citizens. With this, people will have more confidence in his leadership, but also, you know very well that the figures are rising in this country with regards to COVID-19 confirmed cases and the number of deaths. So it is important for the President to come and then address the nation and then tell us what other strategies do the government have in place to contain the spread of this virus.
Okay.
And also perhaps what packages the government has put in place to further motivate our frontline workers.
Now, Mr. Jaune, what difference can the President's address to the nation make as the country is rattled by the virus, as you have just said?
Well, you know very well that since the outbreak of this pandemic, presidents all over the world, leaders all over the world have been at the forefront of the fight. They inspire the citizens, motivate them. Already, some people already are discouraged that perhaps we might not overcome this pandemic as a country. And therefore, if the President, who's supposed to be at the center of all the strategies that the government is doing or whatever they are putting in place, perhaps what the President knows, we expect no one else knows about that with regards to the plans that the government have. So for the President to come out and tell us the strategies and the plans and the efforts that have been put in place to address this issue, I think it will make a big, big difference.
All right. Now, what are some of the issues you considered urgent that needs to be addressed in tonight's statement by the President?
Well, I'm expecting the President to announce a package for our frontline workers. You know very well that of late, some of our frontline workers have been experiencing some challenges even from their family members. You know, asking them not to go to work and to stay home. This is very serious. So if we don't motivate our frontline workers, we don't strengthen our healthcare system, the system might end up collapsing. So I expect the president to announce a package for our healthcare workers and all the frontline workers. But I also want the president to also clarify the alleged corruption that we had, you know, with regards to COVID-19 funds.
All right. Now,
yes.
Now, just finally, before we let you go, how would you rate the government's response to the pandemic?
Well, I have said it since the onset. I have said it and I'll repeat it. I don't think we've taken, as a country, adequate steps to address this pandemic in this country, unfortunately. That's my honest opinion.
All right.
That we haven't taken enough steps to address the pandemic.
All right. Mfamara John, Executive Director of Mbe Kanyan, thank you very much for your time. All right, that was Executive Director of Mbe Kanyan there, Farmer John speaking to us ahead of the President's Nation address later tonight. Next, we head to Banjul because the mayor of the capital city on Thursday launched Operation 100,000 masks to support needy Gambians in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. The country's capital has been among largest cities affected since the outbreak of the novel coronavirus in the Gambia. Ibrahim Sanko has more in this report.
Roy Malik Low, the mayor of Banjul, has appealed to Gambians to unite in the fight against the coronavirus amid a dramatic rise in the number of confirmed cases across the Gambia. Mayor Low launched Operation 100,000 masks on Thursday to support needy Gambians. She said this initiative is geared toward helping Gambians to curb the spread of COVID-19. Low also called upon Gambians in the diaspora to help her accomplish the face mask initiative.
Face mask.
For the face mask, I said earlier in my remarks that other countries have done it, and I think what they can do, we can do it better. The Gambians that are in the diaspora today, they are the ones I gave this task to. I plead to them, let them get up and prepare well and give us 100,000 masks, and I know they can do it.
Mayor Law said Gambians should avoid partisan politics and put all hands on deck to fight the coronavirus pandemic. She said if Ghanaians can join forces to fight against the coronavirus, why not Gambians?
I want to take this opportunity and call on all to put aside our differences, whether political or otherwise, and save our nation, as I intend, with your support, to provide 100,000 face masks for needy Gambians. Other countries have succeeded in the fight. For example, Ghanaians have been able to come together, leaving all their differences, be it political, ethnic, or otherwise, and put their resources together to build a hospital and revamp their health infrastructure to save lives. We can also do it. And that is why I am calling on my brothers and sisters in the diaspora to give a helping hand.
Mayor Low, however, told journalists on Thursday that the Gambia government has not in any way supported any of her efforts to curb the spread of coronavirus.
Those of you who may or are asking what has government done for council in its fight against the pandemic, I wish to make it quite clear that government has not in any way contributed to our efforts at council level, meaning that we have not so far received any funds from government to keep the citizens of Banjul safe.
The Gambia government has made a series of regulations since March when the first case of the virus was reported in the country. Last month, it made the wearing of face masks in public compulsory. The Gambia has a total of 1,556 confirmed cases. 43 people have died from the virus so far. Reporting for iAfrica, I am Ibrahim Sonko.
And from the report there, next we head to Nigeria because Nigerian business owners are losing huge income due to inadequate electricity supply in the country. The West African country still struggles to provide enough electricity for its citizens despite being Africa's largest oil producer. Experts say the government needs to privatize the power sector to avoid further mismanagement of funds. Here's more details of that.
Omoduni Olumide is getting ready for business today. He has to turn on his generator because he has no power supply. Olumide runs a frozen food business that requires steady electricity, but he says he's suffered huge losses as a result of frequent blackouts.
The electricity company, they will give us light for 2 weeks and they will take it for 1 week. Because this is cold room, the more we don't have light, the more the goods get spoiled, number one. And the higher we buy fuel for powering generator, we had it up on the cost of the product, whereby it affects our home profit and also affects the citizens that come to patronize us.
Nigeria still struggles to distribute an average of about 4,000 megawatts of electricity for its nearly 200 million population, a far cry from the estimated 180,000 megawatts required by various businesses and households. Decades of government efforts to expand the electricity supply across the country have been met with corruption and mismanagement of funds. And so, about 15 years ago, the federal government made efforts to privatize the industry, but despite this, still regulates the sector even though it's mostly managed by various private firms. Experts say until private firms can run effectively with the right legislative support, the country may not be able to transmit the required megawatts needed for its citizens.
I think the realization for me is that we had a law. This whole reform process was anchored on the Electricity Sector Reform Act. And because we have not implemented it fully the way it was designed to be implemented, and we have neither reviewed it even after the initial implementation, that is why I think the problems continue to plague the industry.
In May, the government reviewed an existing deal with German firm Siemens to upgrade the nation's power infrastructure and expand the country's electricity grid. However, experts say to avoid further mismanagement of funds and corruption in the system, the government will need to completely privatize the power sector.
There's really no silver bullet. We need to move to a private sector-led market, and that's when you get all the efficiencies that you desire. So government trying to audit or police the market does not just work. We've seen it in other sectors. So I think we need to change tack, if you will, to a more reasonable approach to ensure efficiencies are brought in.
The government says it's already working towards reviewing and reenacting the current electricity law in a bid to fully privatize the sector.
Millions of business owners like frozen food dealers are hoping that efforts by the government to put an end to the many years of poor power supply will pay off soon in order for them to recover more profits and improve their business, something experts say could boost Nigeria's economy and attract more investments.
Nigerian business owners losing revenue due to lack of enough electricity in the country. And from the report there, we come back home because the Gambia continues to battle against the coronavirus pandemic as the number of fresh COVID-19 cases continues to increase. Several measures were taken by the government since the first case was reported in the Gambia in early March. But this is said to have some significant implications on the country's economy. Details of that in this report by Ndesese.
The Gambia continues the fight against the coronavirus on Friday with 67 new cases and 7 new deaths. This latest development brought the total number of confirmed cases to 1,623 and the total number of deaths to 50. Samples from all the 7 new deaths were collected posthumously. Their ages range from 43 to 73 according to the Ministry of Health. About 85% of the new cases are residents of Western Health Region 1. A total of 304 recoveries have been recorded since March when the country recorded its first case of the coronavirus. 139 new laboratory test results were received from the Medical Research Council and National Public Health Laboratory. And of this, 21 new tests returned inconclusive, whereas 67 new tests have been confirmed positive for COVID-19. Gambia's Ministry of Health also announced that 16 of the 18 Gambian students who recently jumped from quarantine upon their return from Saudi Arabia have voluntarily reported to the quarantine centers. 44 people were newly taken into quarantine and 2 new discharges were made. The ministry stated in its 118 national COVID-19 situational report on Friday. The country currently has 396 people in quarantine, 1,269 active cases, 159 probable cases, and a crude case fatality ratio of 3.1%. As the world struggles to fight against the global pandemic, 216 countries, areas, or territories have been affected by COVID-19 according to the World Health Organization. More than 20 million cases have been confirmed worldwide, including 750,000 deaths since the outbreak of COVID-19 in mid-December last year. For iAfrican News, Ndesise.
And from the report there on the latest situation of the COVID-19 pandemic in the Gambia, we will now take a break and come back shortly with the remaining of the story. Stay with us, we'll be right back. Welcome back, and you are watching the World Today News Bulletin on Africa TV. And now to the rest of the stories. Now, the Gambia Red Cross COVID-19 burial team has been stopped from boarding a ferry from Banjul on Wednesday. Its Secretary General Alassane Senghor tweeted last evening the team was returning from voluntary service in the North Bank region when they were stopped from boarding the ferry that carries travelers from a 7-mile waterway. Our Makalo has more details of that in this report.
The Gambia Red Cross Society has expressed concern after a burial team was refused boarding a ferry in Bara on Wednesday. Alhassan Senghor, the Secretary General of the Gambia Red Cross Society, said it is unacceptable for the authorities responsible to have denied a humanitarian service provider from boarding a ferry to Banjul after a burial they have conducted in Bara. The Red Cross burial team has only 2 active pickup vehicles that do collect casualties of COVID-19 to the burial ground. The refusal of letting the team to leave Bara has obstructed other burial services that were to be conducted. Senghor called on authorities to avoid the recurrence of such situation as their mandate is only to serve humanity and to cope the spread of the coronavirus in the country.
We are in an extraordinary situation which requires all Gambians to collaborate to save lives and to prevent the virus from spreading. And the only way we can do that is for all of us to work together. So we've tried, and unsuccessfully the vehicle was left there. Now let's look at the scenario. These volunteers in the burial teams, they do wear PPEs, personal protective equipment. This is very hot. There is a time limit to which they can be in those PPEs. So it's not acceptable that they are delayed and they are put aside waiting until they miss the ferry. That's not acceptable. This is a national issue, and we are all trying to serve our people. So therefore, it's not acceptable. I hope this will be the first and the last.
The Red Cross has been the sole voluntary institution responsible for conducting burial rites of COVID-19 related deaths since the outbreak of the virus in the country. The Gambia Red Cross Secretary General Senghor has dismissed allegations that the burial team is collecting money from the families of those who died from the coronavirus. He said the youths are on voluntary service and had not for once collected money from any family.
Videos circulating on WhatsApp, that's totally unfair, uncalled for, okay? Now, let me just, to make a long story short, and be very clear. The Red Cross is a humanitarian organization that is here to complement government efforts. We are helping people, and all the services that we are providing are completely free of charge. We are not asking for a cent from anybody, including commercial entities. When we fumigate offices, when we fumigate houses, when we fumigate markets, when we fumigate other commercial entities, we do it extremely and clearly and squarely free of charge, because we are trying to stop the spread of the virus. So therefore, nobody should expect that the Red Cross or say the Red Cross is charging.
Senghor urged Gambians to stop being in denial and accept the existence of the virus in the country. Only then the country will be able to defeat the coronavirus. The Red Cross burial team and other Red Cross volunteers have, since the emergence of the virus in the country, provided voluntary services to communities and families of COVID-19 victims. For iAfrica TV News, Awa Makalu.
And from the report there, next we head to South Africa, because the ban on alcohol sale in the country could cause serious effects in the industry amid the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The government imposes the ban as part of measures to curtail the spread of the virus in the country. But authorities in the sector warn that over 18,000 jobs could be lost if the government fails to lift the emergency regulations. Details of that in this report.
Since the second ban on alcohol sales was imposed, the liquor industry has been warning of the severe impact it could have on the industry. Now the figures are starting to emerge. Over 18,000 direct jobs are said to be on the line, with almost 300,000 in the liquor industry value chain now also in the firing line. According to agricultural stakeholders, the situation is severe.
Yeah, the possibility of substantial job losses is on the table. I just attended a meeting now where there's a great concern. Farmers are battling at this stage financially because no payments, they don't get payments from sellers because sellers can't sell the wine, can't get it out. And then also we in 7 months' time, there's the new crop. So what are we going to do with that product?
So far, more than a dozen wine farms have taken the government to court over the new regulations. They say the ban threatens the long-term survival of the industry. The Western Cape accounts for the majority of wine production and agricultural activity in the country. It struggled to make profits even before COVID-19 hit. Now things have become even worse.
We've seen with the regulations and the PPE that's required on farm, transport regulations. I mean, there's substantial additional financial pressure on farmers' cash flows to comply with all the regulations.
A survey conducted by industry body Vinpro revealed that most farmers can't attain bridging capital due to their financial position, and many are running out of options. According to industry figures, the ban has placed more than 350 grape growers and 80 wineries at risk, and the clock is ticking on many others in the value chain. Wines of South Africa have been tasked with marketing the country's wines overseas. It wants to increase exports, which are still legal.
It's also been one of our big focuses from an industry perspective to highlight our plight to our international buyers as well as consumers, to make them understand that our industry is really in a crisis, and to please support the industry. Please buy South African wine as much as possible in order to encourage more orders of wine that can be exported so that these guys can stay alive.
For now, all eyes will be on whether the government will lift the ban, as authorities shift to what could potentially be a relaxation of lockdown regulations in the days and weeks to come.
The other direction, of course, but yeah, so never really.
From the report there in the south, of course in South Africa, finally to South Sudan, because South Sudan citizens living in oil production areas are complaining of health complications, with many facing fears of drinking contaminated water from oil tanks. The government is working on modalities to investigate the causes of the damage by consulting international experts for solution, but the affected communities are calling for urgent response from the authorities. Here's more details of that in this report.
Communities living in oil-producing areas in South Sudan say they are experiencing alarming birth defects, miscarriages, and other health problems. Many say they fear water being consumed by both residents and livestock is polluted by oil.
For sure, there are strange diseases here. You find children of 2 months or 1.5 years suffering from strange diseases. We understand the government is trying to address the environmental challenges, but we need more to be done to protect us.
South Sudan's government says it wants to determine the state of oil operations in the country and any resulting pollution, but the Petroleum Ministry says the process is delayed because it wants an international company with a good reputation to conduct the study.
We know the concerns of the people about the environment. We are also going to have a comprehensive environmental audit, and this also has to be done through an international tender.
South Sudan's government says it is also working with oil companies in the country to build hospitals, schools, and roads for residents of areas where oil is produced. South Sudan depends on oil to fund 98% of its budget. One of the government's policies is to give 2% of oil revenue back to communities living in oil-producing areas for development and the management of oil hazards such as pollution. But those communities say the money has done very little on the ground.
That report there in the South Sudan eventually brings this news bulletin to an end. But for more details on this and other stories, you can also log on our website on iafrica.tv. Once again, many thanks for the pleasure of your company. Stay safe. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.
Debunking COVID-19 myths. Myth 1.
Gis nga yow yaa ngi réer sa booba max bi ak tàngoor bi nii man gis nga man ragaluma COVID-19 corona